Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Basics of New England Research. My name is Ginevra Morse, Vice President of Education and Programming here at American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society. I will be your moderator for today's session. This program is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. Giving today's session is genealogist Ann Lawthers. Ann helps members and not yet members with their family history research by providing lectures, courses, and hands-on workshops at the American Ancestors Research Center, at genealogical conferences across the country, and online. She is a graduate of Wellesley College and the Harvard School of Public Health with master's and doctoral degrees in health policy. Her areas of particular interest include New England and New York, the Mid-Atlantic states, the Southern colonies, Ireland, and migration patterns. So whether your ancestors lived in New England in the 17th century or the 21st century, this presentation will give you the basic information to begin and advance your research into New England records. In preparation for the release of the 6th edition of the Genealogist Handbook for New England Research, this presentation will give you the basic historical context, some general organization of records, go-to resources, and unique strategies that will give you a good foundation to succeed in tracing your New England ancestors. And just to clarify, when we say New England, that includes the present-day states of Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. At any point during the presentation, feel free to type your question into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll address those at the end. There is a syllabus for this session that can be purchased from our online bookstore, and I'll drop that link in the chat in a moment or two. And you'll also find that link in your reminder emails, as well as in the follow-up email that I'll be sending out after today's broadcast. We are also recording this event, and starting tomorrow, you can freely go back and review any of the content from this presentation on our website, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you miss something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always review the presentation later. All right, so without further ado, I will turn things over to Ann.
Thank you, Ginevra. This afternoon, I will be taking all of you on a quick tour of New England. And as Ginevra said, that includes Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. All beautiful places and all full of history and with many resources for genealogists. I will begin by introducing you to how the geography and the settlement patterns of New England influence your search for records and influence how you find clues about your ancestors. Then I will talk about the features of researching ancestors who lived in colonial New England. Then I will move on to key record groups. And in this portion of the talk, I will focus on the importance of really knowing and understanding precisely where your ancestors lived, as records are always location specific. And finally, I will conclude by talking about key repositories for New England research. In the beginning, the area we know as New England was inhabited by people who spoke the Algonquin language and consisted of many tribes that we are familiar with, such as the Wampanoag, the Massachusetts, the Pennacook, the Abenaki, the Mohegan, and many others. The Algonquin group is shown in pink on this map. Now, when European settlers first arrived, they found dense undergrowth, narrow trails, roads clearly not wide enough for a wagon, no bridges to cross water. Most European settlers had come from regions where they were quite settled and the land had been cultivated for a long time. They were not remotely experienced with forest dwelling. The New England landscape is influenced by the Appalachian mountain chain, which in New England is known as the Green Mountains of Vermont and the White Mountains of New Hampshire and Maine. These mountains present formidable barriers to settlement. New England also has several large waterways, as shown on the right-hand map, including the Connecticut River that goes all the way from Long Island Sound up to Connecticut, the Merrimack, which goes from the border of New Hampshire and Massachusetts into New Hampshire, the Housatonic in Connecticut, and the Kennebec in Maine. These rivers, especially the Connecticut, allowed some penetration into the middle part of the region by early settlers, but overall, the original settlement was along the coast. The geography of mountains and waterways dictated the location of the earliest settlements. The first settlements of Pilgrims, Puritans, and others were along the coast, as inland was essentially impassable. In 1622, the province of Maine was established, and in 1629, the province of New Hampshire was separated from Maine. In 1633, Windsor and Weatherfield in Connecticut were settled inland, accessed via the Connecticut River. And 1636 marks Roger Williams' settlement of Rhode Island. Massachusetts acquired Maine in 1652. So you see that by mid-century, the major New England provinces had been established. Only Vermont was not settled by the English in the 1600s. Plymouth Colony was, of course, the first settlement. It was a core group of separatists who had fled initially to Holland before coming across the ocean. It was a small colony and grew very slowly. Massachusetts Bay Colony was established and led by the Puritans. It was much more populous and influential. Plymouth Colony and Massachusetts Bay Colony merged in 1691 to form the province of Massachusetts Bay. Now, the Connecticut River Valley, because the Connecticut was such a wide and deep river, saw early settlements of Windsor and Weatherfield, then Saybrook on the coast, and Springfield in present-day Massachusetts. Shortly after the first settlements of Connecticut, the first roots of Rhode Island were laid down by Roger Williams, a Baptist, who settled in the Narragansett Bay in 1638. Anne Hutchinson arrived in Portsmouth in 1638. Roger Williams was 1636, Anne Hutchinson was 1638, and Newport and Warwick were settled in 1639 and 1642, respectively. The interior of New England was gradually settled along the navigable waterways. As mentioned earlier, in 1622, Captain John Mason and Sir Fernando Gorges received a charter for New Hampshire and Maine. The mouth of the Piscataqua River was settled in 1623 by the Hiltons. In 1629, New Hampshire and Maine were split. Although the very earliest Vermont settlers were French, both New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York claimed territories east and west of the Green Mountains. The territory between the Merrimack River and the Kennebec River was called the Province of Maine in the original land grant to John Mason and Sir Fernando Gorges. Much of the Maine coastal settlement was abandoned after King Philip's War. and there was little new settlement in Maine until after the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War, as a result of the tenuous relationships with the indigenous Abenaki who sided with the French. This map shows the theater of the deadly King Phillips War. Approximately 1/10 of military-age males were killed and 12 towns were destroyed. The war was even more deadly for the native tribes. So what are some of the key dates for the 18th century? For New England, it was a time of dispute over the territory now known as Vermont. In 1749, Governor Benning Wentworth of New Hampshire made first of 135 land grants west of the Connecticut River. And at the conclusion of the 7 Years' War, the King of England declared that the Connecticut River was to be the boundary between New Hampshire and New York. Naturally, New York took this to mean that it owned all the land to the west of the Connecticut River and started issuing grants in 1765, many for the same territory that New Hampshire had already granted to other settlers. The people living in Vermont had little patience with these disputes between the two colonies, and in 1777 declared themselves the independent Republic of Vermont. This map shows New England settlement to about 1760. There's no Vermont, and the settlement, as you can see in red, is really concentrated along the coast and along the major waterways, including the Connecticut River. The first New England states were New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. They all achieved statehood in 1788. Rhode Island was admitted in 1790, Vermont in 1791, and Maine in 1820. Now that I've introduced the pattern of New England settlement, let's discuss the resources that are available to trace your colonial ancestors. Most research of the 17th century will begin with one of the resources listed on this slide. The first two, Anderson's Great Migration series and the Mayflower families, provide biographies and genealogies, while the latter two references, Torrey's New England Marriages and Halleck's New Englanders in the 1600s, point readers to other sources where information is found. I will go into these in a little bit more detail. The Great Migration Study Project was conceived of by Robert Charles Anderson and began in 1988. The goal of the project was to create comprehensive biographical and genealogical accounts of all immigrants to New England from 1620 to 1635, basically from the arrival of the Mayflower to the beginning of the decline in immigration that resulted from the beginning of the English Civil War. There are 3 volumes in the first series, The Great Migration Begins, 1620 to 1633, and the second series, covering the period 1634 to 35, includes 7 volumes and adds 1,500 sketches. The slide shows the biographical sketch for William Towne. Other books from the Great Migration Project that the researcher of the 17th century will find useful include the Great Migration Directory, the Pilgrim Migration and Winthrop Fleet materials. The Great Migration Directory covers up to 1640. It does not include any biographical sketches, but it does list a series of references for each immigrant. Both the Pilgrim Migration book in blue and the Mayflower Migration on the far right-hand side cover the original Pilgrim settlers, but the latter book, the Mayflower Migration, includes new material and new findings since the original publication, which is in blue. And the Winthrop Fleet book provides biographies of the Massachusetts Bay Company immigrants to New England in 1629 and 1630. Now, the Mayflower Silver books, which were published beginning about 1995, cover the Mayflower passengers and the first 5 generations of descendants. As such, the biographies provided in the Silver books are the Bible for the lineage of the General Society of Mayflower Descendants. Now, our Mayflower Descendant publication includes scholarship not only about Mayflower passengers, but also about families that married into the Mayflower lines. This makes it quite useful for those of you who had a sister or brother ancestor who married a Mayflower passenger, but you do not have a direct line back to the passenger. Now, the Mayflower Deeds and Probates is similarly useful because it includes deeds and records for the allied families, not just the Mayflower families. Torrey's New England Marriages is one of the most popular books at the New England American Ancestors Research Center, right after the Mayflower and Great Migration series. Over a period of about 30 years, Clarence Almond Torrey compiled the list of marriages of nearly 37,000 married couples who lived in New England between 1620 and 1700. The work includes the marriage date or the birth year of the first child, the maiden name of 70% of the wives, and the birth and death years for both partners. So it is an extremely valuable resource. Martin Hollick's book, published in 2012, covers new scholarship that was written and published between 1980 and 2010. It is very useful for finding materials that have recently been published about New England immigrants born before the year 1700. Now, the Early New England Families Study Project, directed by Alicia Crane Williams, takes up where Bob Anderson's Great Migration study left off. It includes genealogical and biographical sketches for individuals who married between 1641 and 1700. The book groups the sketches by year of marriage, and we do have a searchable online database at American Ancestors. And then there is a series of books devoted to Maine, New Hampshire, and Connecticut settlers before 1700. The Pioneers of Maine and New Hampshire by Charles Henry Pope, the Genealogical Dictionary of Maine and New Hampshire, and Nathaniel Goodwin's Genealogical Notes for the First Settlers of Connecticut and Massachusetts. Now, let's assume that you have read the scholarship of these early settlers and you wish to find actual records. How do you go about that? Well, the first thing is that you really need to know your jurisdictions. You need to research about the location where your ancestor lived. One of the tricky things about New England records is figuring out which governmental level is going to have a record. For vital records, birth, marriage, and death, these began when a town was created. And in the 20th century, the state became the repository for these records. For land records, some states hold the land records at the town level, others at the county level. And for probate, there are 3 jurisdictional options: town, county, or something known as a probate district. And I will go into this in more detail. So how do you figure out what applies to your own personal research? I would recommend that you begin with the Genealogist Handbook for New England Research. What you see in front of you is the cover of the 6th edition, edited by New England Historic Genealogical Society's senior genealogist, Rhonda R. McClure, and will be released at the end of the year. So let's take a quick peek at the book. The organization of the handbook builds on previous editions and provides significantly enhanced figures. As shown on the left-hand side of your screen, each state section begins with a profile of the state, including maps, information about how to find key records, and summaries. On the right-hand page, you see that within a state section, there are county maps showing the townships within each county, and also at the end of each state section, a table of towns showing the town's county affiliation, when the town was formed, and any parent or daughter towns and special information. So let's take a look at a page for Windham County, Connecticut. On this map, you see Windham County and all the townships that are within the county. Let's say that we are looking for information about the town of Chaplin. In the town table for Connecticut, all the towns are listed in alphabetical order. Chaplin just happens to be at the top of this page, and we see that it is part of Probate District 28. Now, the importance of this will become clear in a few minutes. The town was incorporated about 1822, and it was formed from the towns of Hampton, Mansfield, and Windham. Now, for the family history researcher, this means that if your ancestors settled in the Chaplin area before its incorporation date, say around 1800, then the records you seek may be in Hampton, Mansfield, or Windham, not in Chaplin, because it didn't exist at that time. It all depends on the precise location of your family farm. We also see that the town was known as Suffrage at some point in its existence. And on the far right-hand side, we see that vital records exist in the Barber collection, which is represented by the B, and in an American database represented by the W. And halfway down the page, you will also see the letter N. This means that vital records are at American Ancestors as a manuscript. Now let's talk about those vital records. Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont vital records usually appear on pre-printed cards, as you see on this slide. For the most part, these records are the town clerk's abstraction of the original handwritten town books. So, for example, in 1919, the Vermont legislature required town clerks to fully document all the births, marriages, and deaths from the records, not only of the town, but also the town's churches and the town's cemeteries. The state of Vermont pre-printed blank cards for different types of vital records and sent them to the clerks and said, go forth and abstract. Here on the left, we have a marriage card for a groom. And on the right, we have a birth card for a male chamberlain. And you will see that these cards have a flip side. On the back side, it says where the town clerk got the information. So for the male chamberlain birth, we see that the town clerk, Henry West, abstracted the information from the first Congregational church records, page 150. Now, moving south into Massachusetts, we see that Massachusetts has probably the most complete set of vital records in the nation. They were kept by towns beginning about 1620. Vital records to 1850 have been published in a set of books known as the Tan series, and you can see them shown in the image in the lower right-hand corner of your screen on our shelves at the Research Center. The majority of the Tan series records are for eastern and central Massachusetts. For the western part of the state, the early vital records are slightly less complete, and you may need to consult special genealogical collections such as the Corbin or Shepherd collection. This is what a page from the Tan series book looks like. The records are usually arranged by type of record, e.g. Birth, marriage, or death, and within type by alphabetically. You will also notice that in addition to a fact, such as on this page, Annie William Dean, born on 16 June 1790, you will often see a little abbreviation. And in this case, it's GR3. At the beginning of every volume of the Tan series, including the online versions of the Tan series, is a list of abbreviations telling you the source of the information. So for example, you will see on the right-hand image, CR1 is a church record from the First Congregational Church Unitarian, and CR7 is for St. Peter's Episcopal Church. And oh, by the way, this was an example from Cambridge, Massachusetts. After 1841, vital records in Massachusetts appear as ledgers kept by the town clerk. This shows the deaths registered in the city of Boston for the year 1899. Events in these registers are listed chronologically, and the data collection form has helpfully standardized the information that is being collected. So for example, here we have the date of the event, the date of the death, the name of the deceased, the husband's name if applicable, the cause of death, the residence of the deceased, the occupation of the deceased, and here is the useful genealogical gold mine, the place of birth and names of parents and the parents' names of place of birth. Moving on to Rhode Island. Vital records in Rhode Island before 1850 were collected by James Arnold. James Arnold produced 21 volumes of data, with the last 10 volumes, as shown on this slide, being events that he abstracted from newspapers. The first 6 volumes in the series are organized by county, and the middle volumes include events abstracted from church and town records. Early Connecticut vital records to about 1850 were collected under the auspices of Lucius Barnes Barber, and there are 2 formats for the record. One is an alphabetical card index, as you see on the right-hand side of your screen, and the other is bound books by town, and within the town, the records are alphabetical. The workers who were employed by Lucius Barber transcribed the original town records. This is a page from the Glastonbury book of the Barber collection. The Family History Library has been digitizing many of the original microfilms, so you may find the original handwritten town record at Family Search, but do keep in mind that the information you see from the Barber collection is a transcription, so you will not find any additional information about a specific event in the original town records. But sometimes it's just useful and helpful to see the original handwriting. Next, we have the Charles R. Hale collections. During the period of the Works Progress Administration, Charles Hale collected vital record data from cemetery inscriptions and newspaper notices for events occurring in Connecticut. This is an example of a death record that you can find at Family Search. So what do you do if you can't find the record? Well, you need to pursue vital record substitutes, and those include church records, cemetery records, newspapers, city directories. City directories are just a gold mine of great information, and they often have death dates for people who died in the town. And probate records are also a good vital record substitute. So let's go on to church and cemetery records. Now, the first question you need to ask yourself about church records is, what was my ancestor's denomination? Fortunately, if you have New England ancestors, many New Englanders were Congregationalists, but that is just a starting point. If your ancestor, for example, was from Rhode Island, they might just as well have been Baptist or Quaker. For clues about your ancestors' denomination, particularly if they were among the very earliest settlers in a town, check the county histories. These usually have very robust sections on the early churches in each town in the county. The three major online database companies have indexed church records: American Ancestors, Family Search, and Ancestry. But of course, not everything is indexed, just as not everything is online. Sometimes you will need to venture into the realm of unindexed records. And finally, if you know that your ancestor was a Congregationalist, you might find what you need at the Congregationalist Church archives. So let's look at indexed records. To find church records on any of the sites that I mentioned or at American Ancestors, use the catalog. At American Ancestors, you're going to want to click on search and then select browse databases. This is our catalog of databases. That will bring up the page that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. In the white box that says search by database name, just type the word church and the list automatically filters to just church record databases. Let's talk about indexed records at Family Search. At Family Search, from the main search page, locate the Find a Collection text. It will be in the bottom left-hand corner of the main search page on Family Search. In this case, I have begun typing Connecticut church records. Remember that all records are local, so it's helpful to start with a state. I have typed in Connecticut, and I've started typing the word church, and the search screen automatically suggests that I might be looking for Connecticut church records 1616 to 1955. If I click on that offered link, it brings up the screen where on the right-hand side of your page, where I can input a name and other search parameters as usual. At Ancestry, I will need to select, search the card catalog, which will take me to the catalog search screen. From there, I can type in Vermont and then church. I see that Ancestry has 16 databases of church records for Vermont, and if I select the Swanton database, the search screen on the right appears and allows me to enter name and search parameters. Now, let's consider how to search for a record that is part of an unindexed collection. In this case, I'm looking for church records for Biddeford, Maine, which is in York County, Maine. From the Maine catalog search page, I would, and to get there, I would start at the main search page, click search, and then select catalog. And on the catalog search page, I type in Maine, York, and then Biddeford. The next screen shows me everything that the Family History Library has about Biddeford, Maine. Some of this material is digitized, some of it is only in book form in Salt Lake. If I click on the heading Church Records, then the list expands to show me the 7 items. Not all of these are digitized. As I said, some will be books and others will be on microfilm. But if I click on the records of the First Congregational Church in Biddeford, I am delighted to see that that item is a digital article that I can view. Yay. Now, let me talk about the Congregational Library's digital church record collection. This collection includes colonial era church records under the title New England's Hidden Histories. The collections are listed on this page down at the bottom. And if you see transcription available next to the title and the dates of the collection, it means that you can actually do a name search. Otherwise, you will have to read old handwriting and page through a specific church's records. This is an example of the page from the Dover, New Hampshire church records, the baptisms, marriages, and deaths. It's not transcribed, so you would need to go through it page by page, looking for your item of interest. Well, we've talked about the bread and butter of genealogical records, that is births, marriages, and deaths, and also about church records, an important vital record substitute. Now, let's move on to probate records. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the value of probate records, but for those of you who are not, let me give you a brief introduction. So what is probate? Probate is the process of settling an estate after a death, and that process includes many steps and generates much paper. The most common reason for using a probate record is for verifying family relations. Probate records are an easy way to verify that the child of an individual or to determine a woman's maiden name. Probate records can also be used to approximate the death date. It's usually not in the probate packet, but probate is usually filed within about 3 months after a death. It can also be used to approximate when a daughter was married. If she appears in a will with a married name, then we know she got married prior to the date of the will. If a wife does not appear in a will, then we mostly can safely assume that she has predeceased her husband. Some less obvious use for probate records include tracing the origin of a piece of property or a family heirloom, and also to provide context for your ancestor's life when you review the inventory. Now, finding probate in New England can be challenging. 3 of the states maintain probate at the county level: Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Rhode Island has probate at the town level, and Vermont and Connecticut group towns into what they call probate districts. although do know that after 2011, Vermont Probate District is the same as the county, but most of you aren't looking for probate after 2011, you're looking for it several hundred years earlier. So how do you find the probate district? Well, your go-to source should be the Genealogist Handbook of New England Research. Alternatively, you could go to the main page of American Ancestors, hover over the word search in blue at the top of the page, and select from the drop-down box New England and New York Town Guides. The list of towns for Vermont will also include the probate district as shown here in the circle. Connecticut also has a statewide card indexed, but you do need to go to a family history center or a family history affiliate in order to view it. This slide shows the page for Connecticut probate districts by number. You may recall when I showed the Connecticut town page with the town of Chaplin, it listed the probate district as 28. That is a diagonal piece of red towards the right-hand side of your screen. And it actually includes towns from two counties, Windham and New London County. Here is an example of from the Bennington, Vermont Probate Record Book. It tells us that letters of administration for the estate of Henry Wellbridge of Bennington were being given to Elisha Nichols and Thomas Taylor. And towards the bottom of the page is the inventory of Henry Wellbridge's estate. And this shows the Connecticut Probate Card Index, which is viewable at a family history center or affiliate or at the Connecticut State Library. It gives the name of the deceased, in this case, Joshua Sears, the deceased's town of residence, the probate district, which is Fairfield, and the documents that are included in the packet. So we see here that his packet is from 1754, and it includes a will and an inventory for a total of 2 documents in the packet. Maine probate may be accessed a couple of different ways, although you do need to note that Cumberland County, Maine probate files prior to 1908 do not exist. They were destroyed in a fire in the Portland City Hall in 1907. One source to consult for early Maine probate is Sargent's Maine Wills to 1760 on American Ancestors. Now, from 1760 forward, you can go to Family Search. They have an indexed collection of probate files. Ancestry also has a probate collection. And finally, there's a 2-volume set of probate abstracts published by Picton Press that might be helpful. This shows a page from the Picton Press book. Volume 1 covers all of York County to 1775, while Volume 2 covers 1775 to 1800 for York, Hancock, Washington, and Kennebec counties. Let's talk about Massachusetts probate. American Ancestors has early probate records for many of the Massachusetts counties. Ancestry also has records for the counties. And if using Family Search, use the catalog for your particular ancestor's county of death. New Hampshire probates to 1771 are in the New Hampshire State Papers. We have some microfilm at American Ancestors. Family Search, quite helpfully, has an indexed collection of New Hampshire probate records 1660 to 1973. Remember to search by county for New Hampshire. This screen shows a will that is included in the New Hampshire State Papers, volume 31. It's a will for Godfrey Dearborn, 1680, of Hampton, New Hampshire. It is a transcript, so you see the original spelling. Rhode Island probate may be found at the town level, and it may be found at all 3 of the major online repositories. We have microfilm for an index. At Family Search, you can use the catalog to search by town, and the digital images are locked, so you will need to go to a family history center or a family history library affiliate. Ancestry's Rhode Island probate collection is organized by county, even though the records are really at the town level, and has a variety of materials. This shows the Providence, Rhode Island probate index for the period 1636 to 1899. The index is organized by surname and then chronologically within surname. It gives the type of probate material and the docket number. Land, another essential tool for genealogists. So why use land records? For those of you who are not familiar with the use of land records, this slide summarizes a few key points. First, the grantor, that is, the seller, can mention how he acquired the land. This is important for tracing kinship, especially if the seller acquired the land from his father. He will say so. The grantor can sell land jointly with his wife, in which case we learn her name. Land records place a person at a specific place and time, which is important when migration is involved, even if the migration is only from town to town within the same county. And finally, the description of the land can be compared to other deeds to trace the chain of ownership. The first land records in New England are of 3 types: royal charters, proprietary grants, and deeds from the native tribes. An example of a royal charter is the grant to Mason and Gorges. Now, a proprietary grant was the transfer of land from the colonial ruling body or the governor to groups of investors who were known as proprietors. And finally are the records for original transactions between the indigenous people and the European settlers. This shown on the right is a book by Jeremy Bangs on the land transactions for Plymouth County. And as you might have guessed, a pre-state, pre-republic Vermont is a special case. To find the very earliest land records for Vermont, you will need to review both New Hampshire land grants and New York state patents. Once a tract of land has been patented, subsequent land transactions are recorded by the town or the county, depending on the state. So deeds in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts are organized by county. Do be aware that county boundaries have a way of changing, and some of the very earliest Maine deeds are part of the Massachusetts State Archives collection, because as we know, Maine was part of Massachusetts until 1820. Family Search has a very helpful collection of indexed land records. And for Maine and New Hampshire, you can use the catalog to find the records at the county level. This is an example of a deed from Cheshire County in 1772, where Jonathan Chase Grantor, the seller, is selling to Richard Carleton, grantee, or the buyer, lot number 2 in the town of Ashland. Now, deeds in Vermont, Connecticut, and Rhode Island are organized by town. As always, be aware of changing boundaries. For Vermont, Family Search has a wonderful indexed collection. For the other 2 states, you will need to use the Family Search catalog to find records at the town level. So here is an example of a deed from the town of Orange in the county of Orange in Vermont, from Charles W. Holbrook to Philander Morse. Now let's quickly talk about town records, which are a unique resource for New England. Town records are probably underused by many genealogical researchers. Town records are kept by the clerks in the town and provide a running history and a catalog of all the activities in a town, including the vital statistics, the land transfers, cattle ownership, taxes, selectmen minutes meeting, and other things. These are important because if you go through these records page by page, not only do you get a fascinating view of early New England town life, but you may find your ancestor, because even if they don't appear in the vital records, their presence in the community may be elsewhere in these town records. This is a page from the record of the town of Manchester, Vermont in 1837. At the top of the page is a summary of the number of students educated in each of the town districts. Just below it, we have 3 or 4 marriage records. See what I mean about multi-use books? And then on the right-hand page, we have something known as a warning out. New England towns were responsible for the welfare of their residents and viewed newcomers with suspicion in case they became a burden on the town resources. Now we have covered history, colonial resources, major record groups. Let's turn to the repositories. This slide has some of the key repositories in the region. New England Historic Genealogical Society, the General Society of Mayflower Descendants for all things Mayflower related. Don't forget that we have National Archives for the Northeast region in Massachusetts, and the Connecticut State Library for church records. Now, don't forget, each state has a historical society. Be sure to contact and use the resources at these outstanding organizations for your genealogical research. There are also some unique digital collections to be pointed out. The Maine State Archives has a resource called Digital Maine. Vermont has something called Vermont History. We have a digital library here at American Ancestors. Connecticut has a digital library, as does Rhode Island. This is an example of what you might see when you go to the Vermont History site. They have a special section for genealogists and family historians. So in summary, all the seeds for the states, except for Vermont, were planted in the 17th century. Vermont was claimed by 3 states before declaring independence in 1777 and became a state in 1791. Colonial era resources are often in book format. Vital records in New England began at the town level. Land and probate records may be kept at the town, county, or other jurisdictional record. It's up to you to figure it out, but there are resources to help you. Finally, and perhaps key, study and know the location where your ancestor lived. Location is key to New England research.
All right, well, thank you so much, Anne, for your fantastic, informative, instructive presentation. As a reminder, this has been recorded and it will be posted to our website and YouTube channel later this evening. So you will get an email once it's posted and available, so you can easily go back and watch it as many times as you like. So before we get to your questions, Anne mentioned the upcoming release of the 6th edition of the Genealogist Handbook for New England Research. This book will be released and available for purchase in mid-December of this year, and this new full color edition has an extensive update to the previous edition. It's an indispensable resource for anyone researching ancestry in New England, and it includes the research basics, state-by-state resources, updated contact information for the repositories and town clerks, and comprehensive county and town maps and tables, including the dates established, parent counties, parent and daughter towns, other names, and more. And this user-friendly redesign also restores some useful information from the 4th edition that was left out in the 5th edition, such as earlier probate districts in Connecticut. All right, so with that, let's get to some of your questions. If you have anything that you'd like to ask, go ahead and type it into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to as many as we can in the time provided. So Anne, one of the unique resources that you just mentioned are the town records. And we have a question, are the town records available online?
Yes, many are. Not all of them are. And to find them, you would go to the Family History Library catalog. So go to Family Search, click on catalog, then type in the state, the county, and the name of the town. If the town records have survived and have been digitized, you will see them in the list of results. Then just click on it, and almost all of the ones that are digitized are available to you at home.
Now, we also had a few questions about Catholic records for New England. Can you talk a little bit about how you might go about accessing Catholic records? Are those available online? Is it by state? Is it by archdiocese? Is it by some other, is it by parish? How are you going to find Catholic records for New England?
I absolutely should have mentioned the Boston Archdiocese collection that we have in American Ancestors. We have been engaged in a multi-year project to digitized original parish records for the Boston Archdiocese. Extremely helpful if you have immigrant ancestors to this particular area. For Vermont, your best resource for Roman Catholic records are kept by the American Canadian genealogical societies, and they've published these as repertoires in book form by town. Many libraries will have them. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't think that they are digitally available at Family Search. Many materials are, and for the remaining states for Roman Catholic records, I would go to the Family Search catalog to look. So in terms of Catholic records for the Boston area, do American Ancestors. For Vermont, check out the Roman Catholic repertoire books. There's a whole list of them. I think I included it in the handout. And then for the other states, check out Family Search.
All right, we also had a number of questions regarding finding burials or gravestones for your ancestors, especially for folks not in the not living in the New England area. If you're trying to find a burial or to see if a gravestone or headstone still exists for your ancestor, what might some of the best tools or strategies be?
So if I understand the question correctly, you're looking for a general resource for finding headstones. And Find My Grave is very helpful. It does not obviously capture all cemetery records, but once you have the name of a cemetery for your ancestor, you can contact that cemetery directly for information about the records that they have. Find My Grave, of course, is a site where users supply the information. So it's all volunteer generated material. It hasn't been curated. The memorials and the photographs are all taken and done by volunteers. And as a result, you do need to engage your brain when looking at the material. So if it's just a memorial with text, it's not going to be as helpful to you as if it's an actual photo of a gravestone.
Right, and that's find a grave. I think you said find
Oops.
my grave, which is very Halloween appropriate, but it is find a grave.
Yes, thank you, but it is find a grave. I conflated find my past with find a grave.
Yes, so find a grave is a great resource. Also, someone mentioned cemetery associations. Some states
That
or
is
regions
true. Yes.
have those as well, and you should reach out.
And also on the research wikis on family search will have a whole section on cemeteries for a county or a town. So that's another place to go.
We also have several questions about passenger lists. So several people are asking about early passenger lists, 17th century, early 18th century passenger lists. Are you likely to find them? And if so, have most of them been transcribed and published?
Okay. Passenger lists were not required until 1820. 1820. Up until that time, a ship could dock at any port in the United States, and the master of the ship was not required to file a manifest of the list of passengers. The exception is Philadelphia. Philadelphia, because of the large influx of foreigners, i.e. Germans, from the Palatinate, they began requiring passenger lists in 1729, but it was only for ships that were carrying passengers outside the British Commonwealth, outside the British Empire. So you won't generally find any passenger lists after about 1640. If there are scattered fragments that exist, and there's a book by Hotten, Hotten, called Original Lists of Persons of Quality. What a name. That has fragments of some passenger lists. But basically, you will not find the name of the ship that your ancestor came over on if they came over on in the 17th or 18th century.
And now I know we're a little over time, but maybe just a few more questions. Several people are also asking about migration patterns, whether, into, around New England, out of New England. Mm-hmm. Are there some go-to resources to understand migration patterns and to see how your ancestor might fit in?
Migration was pretty much on hold until the Revolutionary War because the land west of the Appalachian mountain chain, remember there's that huge barrier, was not available. In fact, migration from Massachusetts, Connecticut into New York was limited for a time up until about the Revolutionary War. It did occur. The most common migration pattern was directly west. So if your ancestor lived in Vermont, they went to New York. They lived in Massachusetts, they went to New York. They lived in Connecticut, they went to New York. And then from New York, after the Revolutionary War, the world opened up. In terms of a reference, there's a book by Dollarhide, which is inexpensive and easily accessible, that describes some early migration patterns. But if your ancestor went to all the trouble of clearing all that brush and taming the forest in the 17th and early 18th century, they tended not to move very far. And also keep in mind that when they did move, they used waterways. So Vermont was settled by Connecticut individuals and individuals from Massachusetts primarily.
Now, there were also a few questions about where to find records, especially you mentioned, Vermont being a contested area between and boundaries being disputed across various parties. So if you're looking for records in a certain area that was once New York, but now it's Vermont, where do you look for those records? I mean, do you look in Vermont? Do you look in New York? Do you look somewhere else? Or does it depend?
I would start with Vermont, and I would start at the town level. Because even if a community such as Manchester, Vermont, which was settled, it was a New Hampshire grant, but it was to New Yorkers. So the town of Manchester, Vermont, on the west side of the Green Mountains, you can trace the ancestors. You can trace people's migration from the New York, it was the Nine Patents area, up to Manchester, Vermont, starting with the town records. The other suggestion is probably easier than wading through the town records is look at the county histories. Look at the county histories for the early Vermont counties and the early towns. They are full of information about migration patterns and where people came from.
All right, well, thank you again, Anne. I know there were a ton of questions that we didn't get to, but I will suggest a few other resources. So first of all, we have several subject guides on our website, AmericanAncestors.org, that are completely free. You just log in, but you can use a free guest account to log in and access our subject guides. So I saw that there were questions about Acadian research, French Canadian research, Quakers, immigration and naturalization, Catholic records. So we have subject guides that can assist you in all of those areas, again, free and available on our website. And I can, that's americanancestors.org/read will bring you to our list of subject guides and topics there. We also have a free chat service. So Tuesday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time, you can use our chat service and have some direct communication with the genealogist. So especially if you have kind of a quick reference question, you're looking for, is there a guidebook or a handbook for a certain area? Are you likely to find this type of record in this area? Those are great questions to avail yourself of our chat service, and you can go to americanancestors.org/chat. You see that URL on our screen. And then also you can hire our research services team if you'd like research done on your behalf. You can just write to research@nehgs.org, and American Ancestors members do receive discounts on our research services. So you can learn more about all the resources that we have, any area of family history you may be delving into. You can learn more at americanancestors.org, and I will be including much of that information, as well as a link to the recording and the syllabus in my follow-up email to you later today. So thank you again for joining us. As you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American Ancestors or becoming a member to help keep these programs free and to create other opportunities for you and for others. And if you'd like to access more how-to resources, such as those subject guides that I was just talking about, all of our archived webinars, we have over 100 videos on our website. All of our free webinars are recorded and available online. You can just go to americanancestors.org/education. So best of luck in your research, and I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.